If everyone could take their seats, I think we'll start. Is my mic working?
Yes, it is.
Good. Rachel, water. Can you give me water? So okay, we are going to get started with the inaugural TTC meeting. I'm Councillor Jay Robinson, the chair of the TTC, and very happy to be here. So I'm going to actually call our meeting to order and ask if there's any declarations of interest in accordance with the Municipal Conflict of Interest Act. And I'm seeing none. So we'll move on. And I thought it would be nice, since it's our very first meeting, as well as there's a number of new members on the TTC, including myself, just to go around the table and introduce ourselves, if the committee would be open to do that, and let us all know if you were here before or you're new, and a little bit about why you're eager to be part of this commission. So I'll start with Councillor Denzel Menon Wong. I think you might be. All right, passion. Okay, let's go on to Alan.
My name is Alan Heisey. I've been on the board 6 years, I think, and I find it a wonderful opportunity to debate and policy. I enjoy our discussions. I'm looking forward to working with everybody here.
Thank you, Alan. And Joanne?
Member. I'm going into my 3rd year, and I joined the board after I retired. I'm a downtowner, and transit is the lifeblood of a city, and I'm here to see if I can help.
Excellent, thank you. Jennifer?
I'm Jennifer McKelvey. I'm councillor for Scarborough Rouge Park. I'm new to Toronto Council and new to the TTC board, and I'm very excited to be on this board because I take both GO Train and TTC regularly. Thanks.
Good. Councillor Carroll?
Yes, I'm Shelley Carroll, councillor for Don Valley North, a new ward name. I've been a TTC commissioner for 2 years, and then I needed a 2-year rest. Now I'm back again, but I have been chosen to stare at the TTC budget since 2004. So I think I can help in that regard.
Excellent. Councillor Bradford?
Brad Bradford, Ward 19, Beaches, East York. I'm here because I think that transit is about access to opportunity, and I'm here to help build out the transit network. So very excited to work with all of you on that.
Excellent. Okay, and Councillor Kim-Janis, go ahead.
Jim Carey-Janis, Ward 22. 2 words, folks, Shepherd Subway.
Oh, dear. All righty, on that note, let's move on.
I guess you've been warned, Chair.
Okay, so the first order of business, now that we know who we all are and why we want to be here, which I think is terrific, is actually to have our Brian Leck from the TTC, our General Counsel, come forward and administer the oaths of office. So I'm actually going to, it's not for everybody because some people are carrying on from last term, but for those of us who are new, including myself, we're going to do that. So I'll throw to Brian at this time. Oh, where are you?
Thank you. I'm going to administer this with all of you from where I'm sitting. It's my distinct pleasure to swear you in and with this oath of office. It's going to be something like a choir performance. I'm going to ask that you all read through the oath. The only change that will pop up is when you read your name. It will not be in harmony with the names of others, obviously, but otherwise, we'll walk through this sentence by sentence. Okay? So if we can start at the top, and I, state your name.
Robinson, having been elected or appointed to the office of the Toronto Transit Commission, Commissioner in the City of Toronto, do solemnly promise and declare that, 1, I will truly, faithfully, and impartially exercise this office to the best of my knowledge and ability. 2, I have not received and will not receive any payment or reward or promise thereof for the exercise of this office in a biased, corrupt, or in any other improper manner. 3, I will disclose any pecuniary interest, direct or indirect, in accordance with the Municipal Conflict of Interest Act. 4, I will be faithful and bear true allegiance to Her Majesty Queen Elizabeth II, or the reigning sovereign for the time being. I make this solemn declaration consciously believing it to be true and knowing it to be is the same force and effect as in made under oath.
Thank you, and I would ask that you now sign the document, and I'll walk around and collect it from each of you. Thank you.
Okay. Do I? Matter. So if Derek Moran could come forward, if he is indeed, there he is, and welcome Derek, and you've got 5 minutes. I don't see the buttons.
I just want to say, by me speaking at this meeting, this shall not be deemed to be in any way my consent, expressed or implied, in doing so is fraud. God bless Her Majesty the Queen, and long live Her Majesty the Queen. So I don't know if you remember Councillor Robinson at Scarborough Executive Committee. Mayor Tory mentioned to me that these meetings are a chance for the public to show up and make a deputation. So I wish to make a deputation on who should be the next vice chair of the TTC board. But since there's actually no definition for deputation in this board's bylaw definition section, the Dictionary of Canadian Law or Black's Law Dictionary, one then would use the definition found in a regular dictionary. So in the Canadian Oxford Dictionary, take notice the definition for deputation is a group of people appointed to represent others, usually for a specific purpose, a delegation. Now, Councillor Carroll might remember at the budget consultation a year ago, Councillor Crawford said something that struck me when he thanked everybody for coming out to delegate. So I actually looked up that word in Black's Law Dictionary, 9th edition. Delegate is defined as one who represents or acts for another or a group. Now, there's also a definition for uninstructed delegate, a delegate who is not instructed and may therefore vote according to his or her conscience. There's also a definition for instructed delegate, a delegate who is bound to vote according to a constituency's expressed wishes. The definition for constituent is 1, a person who gives another the authority to act as a representative, a principal who appoints an agent. 2, someone who is represented by a legislator or other elected official. 3, one part of something that makes up a whole, an element. I like to think of myself as number 3, just one guy here and 3 million people here in the City of Toronto. So I wish to make a deputation. I appoint the Toronto Transit Commission Board to act as the trustees for me in this matter, as it is my express wish that Councillor Shelley Carroll be the next vice chair of the Toronto Transit Commission Board. Take notice my instructions are for the Toronto Transit Commission Board to make Councillor Shelley Carroll its next vice chair, barring any objections, of course. Are there any objections? Going once. Any objections? Going twice. Third time, are there any objections? Let the record show there were no objections. And I just want to go over with the last 3 minutes I have the reasons for wanting Shelley Carroll to be, or Councillor Shelley Carroll now, she's not a private citizen anymore. I bumped into her actually about 1.5 years ago at the Canada Square Theatre, and we sat down and we talked for a bit. And she was kind enough to expand upon for me about the Webster effect that has cast a pall over the City of Toronto here, which has paralyzed all of you City of Toronto employees from doing the right thing and saying the right thing for fear of losing your job, which is ironic because the Webster effect was named after Gary Webster, who I believe used to do Rick Leary's job, I think, at some point. So I'm sure that Councillor Carroll will do her best to negate the Webster effect here at the TTC, ironically. Second thing is, I don't know if anyone here ever had a chance to see Councillor Carroll in action at the Toronto Police Services Board. She was by far the most effective. She was by far, Councillor Carroll's interrupting me. She was by far the most effective board member of the Toronto Police Services Board. But on the other hand, there's also a saying that about being the best house on a bad street. But Councillor Carroll, if you'd been there, had a way of making things really awkward by constantly making and asking tough questions, especially of Chief Saunders, like the Andrew Loku case about whether or not the tape was tampered. So she was very effective in looking out for the public's interests, and her absence from the police board is noticeable as nobody really asks questions, tough questions there anymore, and the meetings go by pretty quickly. And also, this is one that's a touchy one. I want you to make sure, Councillor Robinson, if you can look out for Councillor Carroll, because when I bumped into her at the Canada Square, Councillor Carroll also indicated to me that she had been subjected to harassment to some extent while she was a member of the Toronto Police Services Board. So I'm sure you'll make sure that that doesn't happen here. And yeah, I just want to point out that a definition of a bylaw in Bouvier's Law Dictionary are rules and ordinances made by a corporation for its own government. And I object to not being able to speak on item number 6. A former City of Toronto councillor told me that if there's an item on the agenda at any of these meetings, that it is the right of the public to be able to speak on it. You just can't pass a bylaw which negates our freedom of expression, which is guaranteed in that magical piece of paper called the Constitution in Section 2B, which is being done right now if I'm not being allowed to speak on item number 6. Councillor Robinson, am I able to speak on item number 6 tonight? Now let the record show I don't consent to this.
Thank you very much. Before we move on to, well, we're actually already there, the election of the vice chair. Our CEO, Rick Leary, would like to make a quick presentation to the members of the commission.
Can we elect the vice chair first? Okay, we can do that now.
He would like to do it now, so.
Can I just quickly address, because I don't want it hanging in the air. As much as I want to thank the deputant for the compliments, I will not stand. I have intention to vote for another commissioner, so I just want to make sure that people understand I will not stand. I'm not running for vice chair, but I thank him for his compliments.
Okay, thank you. Okay, our CEO.
Thank you, through you, Madam Chair. The TTC also has another tradition once the individuals have taken the oath, and that's to get a pin from the TTC for joining the family. So I will hand it out to each of you and ask you to wear it as proudly as we at the TTC wear our pins.
Oh, yeah, if you lose it, that's it. Lovely. That's beautiful. Okay, we'll put that on now. Okay, now moving on to the actual, the business. So I'm going to actually hand the gavel to Kevin Lee, the head of the Commission's Services Clerk, and he's going to actually walk us through, explain the process by which the Vice Chair is elected.
Thank you, Chair. We will now deal with nominations for Vice Chair of the Toronto Transit Commission. Commissioners, in accordance with Section 19A2 of the Procedures Bylaw, commissioners may nominate only citizen members of the board for the position of Vice Chair. Citizen members may nominate themselves. All nominations must be regularly moved and include the consent of the nominee. I would now call for nominations for the position of Vice Chair of the Toronto Transit Commission. Commissioner Minnan-Wong.
Yes,
Commissioner Minnan-Wong nominates Commissioner Heisey. Do I have any additional nominations? With no further nominations, I would like to now call for a vote on Commissioner Minnan-Wong's nomination. May I have a show of hands, please? On a majority vote, I am pleased to announce that Commissioner Heisey is the Vice Chair of the Toronto Transit Commission, and I would invite Commissioner Heisey to assume the Vice Chair position at the table. Thank you.
Well, congratulations, and look forward to working with you and with everyone. All right, so we're going to move on to our next item now that the election of the Vice Chair has been completed. Okay, so first order of business is the minutes, and if someone could move those, that would be ideal at this time. Oh, that's correct, because only two. Okay. Councillor Denzel Minnan-Wong will move that. Thank you, Denzel. All in favor? Opposed? That carries. Okay. So we will run through the order paper. Some of these items that are at the top of the order paper are actually award related, the first couple, but later in the agenda we get into more detailed matters. So I'll just walk through it now and see if there's any holds, etc. So the item 3 is an award. Item 4 is also an award. Item 5 is the CEO's report to the board. So there's that's a presentation by our CEO. Again, and item 6 is also a board orientation. Item 7 is the approved minutes of the advisory committee, and I understand we have a report on that.
The chair of the ACAT typically would introduce it. Raymond is ready to do that.
Okay, so we'll wait till that time. Okay. Item 8 is the appointment of the members to the Advisory Committee on Accessibility. So we'll also wait for that. Item 9 is the TTC Board of Governance, and I believe we have deputants on that matter. On item 9, item 10 is the bylaw to govern the TTC board meeting proceedings. And again, we have deputants on that matter, so I'll hold those in my name. Item 11, proxy to vote TTC shares in Toronto Coach Terminal. Would someone like to put forward a motion to approve or to move that? Okay. Councillor McKelvey did that. And all in favor? Opposed? That carries. Item 12 is the notice of award, and that's related to Runnymede Station accessibility.
Can I hold that? Quick.
Councillor Carroll would like to hold that. So we'll put that in your name. Item 13 is the notice of award making Wilson Station accessible. Would someone like to motion to receive?
My question actually pertains to both of them. It's a quick question. I can even ask it offline while we're doing some other things if I know.
Okay, so do you want me to hold the two?
Talk to Susan offline? Okay, thanks, yeah, okay.
So you'd like us to hold 13 as well in your name for now? Okay. Item 14 is the purchase of the 48 low-floor wheel trans, the minibus. So the procurement, is there any motion to receive? Okay, Councillor Carroll will move that. All in favor? Opposed? That carries. Okay, great. So now let's head back to item 3. Yes, I do have them. So this is great news. This year, the TTC was recognized as one of the top employers in the GTA. The Greater Toronto Top Employers Competition is a project by MediaCorp Canada and has become a benchmark in the Greater Toronto Area for workplace best practices. The TTC submitted an application for consideration to be recognized as one of the Greater Toronto's top employers at the TTC. It was evaluated under 8 criteria: conditions, so physical workplace, work atmosphere and social, health, financial, and family benefits, vacation and time off, employee communications, performance management, training and skills development, and community involvement. So I'd now like to invite Rick Leary, our CEO, Gemma, our Chief People Officer, who I haven't actually met yet, I look forward to meeting, and Megan McRae, our Executive Director of Human Resources, if you could all come forward to make the presentation for this award. So congratulations to staff on a well-earned honor. We'll now move to item 4. And again, this is a wonderful occasion to celebrate people who have played a significant role in our transit system in our city for many years. And today we have 7 employees with us. And all of these people have achieved 40 years of TTC service in 2018. That gives me a chill. 40 years, that's incredible. It's an exceptional milestone, and the board is grateful for the opportunity to acknowledge these dynamic individuals who have dedicated their lives, really, to the TTC. So as I call each of your names, if you could please come forward to receive your certificate and the board's thanks and appreciation for your dedication to the TTC for the past 40 years. Blair Allen. Let's do it all in one group. So, no, that's a difficult job and will be over the next few weeks as well. Our next employee is David Crabtree, Garage Operations Assistant, Bus Maintenance and Shops. Welcome, David, come on up. Our next honoree is Joseph DeCero, foreman, foreperson, rail vehicles, rail cars, and shops, subway operations. Joseph, if you could come forward. Next is Art Howard, our Senior Traffic Checker, Strategy and Service Planning. If you could come forward. Next is Elliot Jordan. Elliot is the Senior Store Person, Materials and Procurement. Come on up, Elliot. Lionel Jordan is next. Lionel, congratulations. He's the Senior Instructor, Training and Development. Okay, and our next employee that we're recognizing today is Paolo Macri, the operator, Bus Transportation Arrow Road Division. Welcome, Paolo. I'd also like to congratulate and thank the employees who unfortunately could not attend today, but have also attained, if you can believe it, 40 or 45-year milestones. 40-year service recipients unable to attend: Alan Irwin, Dennis Richardson, and Rudolph Tomlinson. Let's give them a round of applause. And achieving 45 years of service are the following four people, again, who are unable to attend today, but I will read their names and we can recognize them. David Crockford, Valentino de Mezio, Robert Fraser, and Wolfgang Thorent. Congratulations to all of these. Okay, that was fun, and really happy to see these people who are so committed to the commission, the TTC. We're going to move on now to the item 5 before us on the agenda, which is the Chief Executive Officer's report to the board, and it is for information only. It's a presentation, and our CEO is going to deliver a presentation from the deputation table. I don't know how to work that.
Okay, good morning, everyone. Through you, Madam Chair. Hello, I'll introduce myself again. I'm Rick Leary. I'm the CEO of the TTC, and I want to welcome you to the first of the new TTC board meetings. Just a little bit of history for you. The first board meeting actually took place for the TTC on August 16th, 1920, and that was to plan the start of the operations of a new organization. So although the TTC will celebrate its 100th anniversary in 2021, you will be here to celebrate the centenary of the board next year. So that is exciting. With that, today I'm going to, we have the presentation in front of you, and today I'm going to talk you through an overview of our organization, some recent accomplishments, and how we intend to build upon them, the challenges we face in public transportation today, our vision forward, and the next steps in working together. As the riding public is aware, we are a large integrated transit system. We move more people per day just on our streetcar network than any other transit system in the GTHA. This is my third transit organization that I've worked for, and in my experience, I can tell you that we have at the TTC some of the most talented and dedicated employees who make our system run so smoothly as it does and pull off that daily miracle of moving 1.7 million customers each business day. This all adds up to a staggering 500 million customer trips per year and makes us the third largest transit system in North America, only behind Mexico City and New York City. The TTC is committed to accessibility and is on track for ensuring that we're completely accessible by 2025. 45 of our 75 subway stations are now accessible, with St. Patrick being the most recent. Buses and the new streetcars, I'll add, are accessible, and we're working with our advisory committee on accessible transit to ensure that we continuously improve accessibility for all customers. On our Wheel-Trans transformation, we'll redesign the way we serve customers with differing abilities to offer them a more modern, flexible, and spontaneous way to travel the TTC that fits their travel abilities. Our streetcar system, for instance, when we talk about the numbers of our ridership, if it was a standalone transit system, it would rank number 24 throughout North America. A little even more impressive, our bus network, if it was a standalone transit system, it would be the 5th largest transit system in North America. You know, we had steady increasing ridership for more than a decade. After a recession-related dip in the mid-90s, growing residential and commercial development and increased transit services helped grow our ridership. Revenue ridership increased steadily for about 12 years from 2003 to 2014, and then it actually stabilized and tapered. Many of us know that many large North American transit systems have been experiencing this exact same stagnation or decline. When you look at Chicago and New York and Montreal and Boston, many transit systems in North America have lost 8 and 10% of their ridership during this time. We have, from an operating perspective, our budget, we have a very large $1.85 billion operating budget, of which we have the highest fare box recovery ratio in North America, which also means that we have the lowest operating subsidy. Almost 65% of the revenue comes directly from the fare box, meaning that we need $600 million in subsidy, 85%, which comes from the City of Toronto. From a capital perspective, we have a $6.8 billion, and I'll mention funded budget over 10 years, and 82% of that goes directly to state of good repair, working on items such as vehicle maintenance and track replacement. And these are not very exciting items, but this is what enables us to continue moving people. With the short-term increase in federal funding through the Public Transit Infrastructure Fund, 45% of our current capital budget comes from the federal and provincial governments. Note that on this slide refers only to the portion of the capital needs that are actually funded, and you'll hear more in later months about the total capital needs, which include the unfunded. We have 15,000 employees, of whom 12,000, or about 80%, are unionized. There was massive hiring in the 1954 when the subway opened, and then again 30 years later in the late 80s. And now we're here, fast forward 30 more years, and we face the need for hiring again as people retire. And as you can see, 16% of our workforce is better than 20 years of service, 9% has 25 plus years, and we have a significant number of employees with 30, 40, and a few even with 50 years of service. And what does this mean again? A significant number ready to retire. Last year alone, we hired 1,000 operators from a pool of 35,000 applicants. This is a desirable place to work, and one of the reasons why, for the past several years, we've been named one of Greater Toronto's top employers. As you know, we recently developed our second 5-year corporate plan, and through an extensive consultation process that included staff, frontline employees, customers, our previous board, and other stakeholders. Through this 5-year plan, you'll note that it actually goes well beyond into the future with a picture of looking out 25 years, just as our partners have done. The theme of this corporate plan is advancing to the next level, which is really about building on what we've accomplished so far. These accomplishments really demonstrate the TTC's commitment and investment in the number of critical areas, including accessibility, reliability and dependability, putting out the service we advertise, and building future ridership. Thank you. In the past few years, we've opened an amazing Leslie Barnes. We've converted Line 4 Shepherd to a one-person train operation, and we've opened the Line 1 extension to Vaughan Metropolitan Center. Trains are now running on our automatic train control system between DuPont and Vaughan Metropolitan Center, and we've introduced a 2-hour-based transfer this summer, and we continue to expand our family of services for Wheel-Trans customers. As for the subway, there was a period of time in all modes that the TTC was really challenged with having vehicles available for service, and what we've done is we've put a comparison of 2017 and 2018 for you. Now, not only are we able to meet our commitment to provide service, but we've added service in 2018. Building on accomplishments further, on the bus side, all of our garages are providing what's required and more. Substantially more buses go into service in 2018 than before. We always try to exceed the 100% mark, recognizing something always happens on the streets of Toronto, and it's important that buses are available to meet the commitments of our customers. The same is true on streetcar, with the additional and the new streetcars coming in. In May of 2018, the board approved service improvements to address overcrowding and to increase bus express service. This map shows the breadth of express service throughout the city. The more rapid and reliable service offered by an express route helps address the city's congestion issues, benefiting nearly 70 million customer trips a year, and this acts as a bridge solution while other rapid transit solutions are being developed. As you know, the King Pilot Project was initiated in November of 2017, and a year later we looked at 3 measurables: reliability, ridership, and travel times. By all these measurables, the pilot has been deemed a success and was extended by Council in December of 2018's meeting. In 2017, King Streetcar had 72,000 daily trips. And a year later in 2018, it rose to 84,000 daily trips. Our new fleet means increasing reliability for our customers as well. We reached the halfway mark for the Bombardier streetcar by the end of this year. All of our old streetcars, decades-old streetcars, I should say, which have been running by the grit and determination and the innovation of our maintenance staff, will be off the road. Our 80th new Wheel-Trans vehicle entered service in January, and on today's agenda, there was a report that apprised you of the purchase of 48 additional vehicles. By April of 2020, half of the 2,200 buses in our fleet will have been purchased in the last 4 years. And there's some added bonuses beyond the reliability on the vehicle. Customers on the most recent buses also have the ability to charge their cell phones as they ride on the TTC. Now, I want to talk to you a little bit about some of the key challenges facing public transit today. And for the longest time, traditional transit really was the only game in town. There was a time when public transit meant moving passengers from the suburbs to the urban jobs. Typical work schedules were around rush hours and 9 to 5. Traditional route designs were to feed the subways, and transit was really a peaks and valleys service. There was little need for flexibility and or change in our practices. Along comes the 21st century and more of a need to become nimble and efficient, and passengers today have become our customers. Now I'm going to speak of 4 key challenges in no one particular order of priority, but I'm going to start by saying that customers want their choices in the palm of their hands, and they don't want to be limited. Customers want to see and expect seamlessness in their travel choices, and there's an expectation for innovation and government working in the best interests of taxpayers. Customers want and expect to see more fare and service integration with other transit systems, and we as an organization need to recognize this and be more agile and work towards these solutions. Our focus really has to be on our customers' journey and experience and meeting our customers' expectations. Toronto is a place that people want to be, and we in transit need to support the city building. It's a fact that transit affects people's lives. They depend on us to get to and from their jobs, their schools, and to see family members. Our reliability and our reputation is paramount to our success and growth, and we're also critical to the success of city initiatives. Our growth will continue to getting vehicles off the street, and as transit moves further to electrification of its bus fleet, it also helps to address climate change concerns. Partnerships with others is also going to be very key for our success, as no individual organization can do it alone. We have to break really from the past, and there'll be more complex relationships as we move forward, and we'll serve our customers' desires and the city's needs. A few partnerships are actually identified here on the slide, but there are so many more that we interact with. We have our vendors and our academia. We spend much of our time with Toronto Hydro as we the electrification, our friends in the unions, in the media. Transit must be a priority for the city and the region, and the TTC must take a leading position at the table. It's critical that we work in partnership with other regions, because ultimately their riders are potential customers of the TTC. Our commitment to you is that we will lead in change and embrace mobility as a service. We're also aware that the demand for funding outweighs the city's ability to pay. The numbers on this page are rather astonishing, but clearly are not enough to sustain the existing business model. We need to assess opportunities and possibilities to become more efficient. We have to review what our primary role is, assess make or buy opportunities, and also have to assess the possibilities of, I say, second sourcing, and that's not necessarily outsourcing. We have to address our inefficiencies. As is stated in our corporate plan, we need to provide more reliable information, better determine and prioritize our long-term needs, recognizing the financial impacts of the city. In addition to industry-wide or broader challenges, there are a few challenges that we face within our system, and these are for ongoing projects as well as capacity. We're facing challenges with some large projects, but we are taking steps to mitigate them. SAP has now been implemented in our HR and our finance sections, and I'll tell you it's working really great, and it's replacing our 30 to 35-year-old systems. Along with our older streetcars, I could tell you that the TTC really gets the best use of its assets, but unfortunately, at the same time, I would tell you that we still operate using dot matrix printers at this organization. ATC, or Automatic Train Control, hit a major milestone in December when Line 1 began running an ATC north of DuPont Station. This means a more reliable ride for our customers in that section, and we'll be bringing you a full report on ATC in April, along with our Line 1 capacity needs report. Regarding our capacity challenges, we are addressing these challenges around overcrowding and capacity. Our busiest subway, Line 1, operates at capacity. We have made improvements, and more are coming, but we do remain concerned. We need to start addressing transit needs for 2026 and beyond. Our customers have high expectations for excellent service, and it is our corporate goal to meet those expectations. In other words, to continue to provide the service that we advertise. In one year, we had the worst of times and the best of times. The worst of times came on January 30th of last year, when the perfect storm led to some of the worst crowding we've ever seen at Yonge and Bloor Station. So bad, in fact, we had begun the process of closing and evacuating the station. We worked really hard to find solutions, including adjusting our station staffing, route structure changes, and implementing what we call runners-directed trains on Line 1. The results have been a more consistent and reliable service for our customers. And the best of times actually came this past December, when in 3 days, we put through 29 trains per hour through Yonge and Bloor South Station in 1 hour. That's from 8 a.m. to 9 a.m., the peak of the peak service on our rush hour. And for a reference, our standard or our scheduled requirement for trains is 25.5 trains per hour. And historically, we've only put the maximum number of 22 to 23 trains per hour. So what does this really mean? We have found a way to deliver service to approximately 5,000 more customers in that 1 hour time frame. But what I'd really like to do now is introduce you to the architect of that plan, and that's the TTC's Chief Operating Officer, Jim Ross. And I'm going to ask Jim to walk you through it. We have a short time-lapsed video demonstrating what it took to demonstrate this feat. So Jim, if you wouldn't mind walking us through this.
Sure. Thank you, Rick. Good morning. So every morning rush hour, in addition to the vast bus and streetcar network that Rick spoke about, our Transit Control Center manages 119 trains across the 4 lines of our rapid transit network, and 65 of those are on Line 1. The North Hostler is a critical second route from Wilson Yard. That went into service September 2nd, with trains leaving the yard in automatic mode every morning. The South Hostler remains very busy during service buildup, and that was converted to automatic train control on December 3rd when we extended ATC down to DuPont. Every morning, 49 of the 65 trains on the line for peak service come from Wilson. About 733,000 customer trips are taken on that line every weekday, and I realize that this is sped up quite a bit, but there are a few things I'd like to try to draw your attention to. The first is staff. Following the events of last January 30th, and as part of the Mayor's 10-point plan, we increased station staff by 10, and we deploy them every morning, not only to Bloor, but at stations further down the line to help us deal with incidents quickly and keep trains moving. We've also improved the training for our staff so that they have the skills needed to manage crowding, and we've conducted exercises supported by Toronto Fire to practice those skills. Another initiative of the 10-point plan is run as directed trains, and they were reintroduced to the line in February. And as of September, we now have 4 RADs for the morning peak and 2 for the afternoon peak. They are stationed in pocket tracks and are ready to enter service at a moment's notice to help mitigate delays and increase our capacity along the busiest portion of the line. Another thing that you'll notice is that almost every customer boards the next train into the station. And not that long ago, it wasn't uncommon for customers to have to wait many mornings for 2 or 3 trains before they could board one. As Rick noted, a year ago, we would typically achieve 23 trains on average through Bloor, even though we schedule 25 and a half. The nature of this business is that delays will occur, but the addition of the RADs, the increase in station staffing, reliability improvements like ATC are all making a real difference to our customers. And since October, we've achieved 28 trains or better on 14 different mornings. As you'll note by the high fives that you'll see at the end of the video, achieving these service improvements is a huge source of pride for all of our staff, and we are all proud of how much we've been able to improve in a relatively short amount of time. Thank you.
Thank you, Jim. On the next slide, as the CEO of the organization, I'll just give you a little bit of the vision that I've put in place, and it really is to reinforce the foundation of the business and to build for the future. And I'll tell you that we'll move in 2 parallel streams, moving in tandem. The first is about providing what we advertise. It's truly reputational. It's about getting the basics right. I would refer to us as, many times I tell people that we're a utility. We're just expected to be there when people expect us to be there. I would mention, or our customers, I should say, I would mention that I believe that the foundation of transit in many cases has become a lost art. Who would have thought short turns would have been an acceptable practice, or the fact that vehicle failures wouldn't negatively impact our customers' experience? I would also note for you that this is an industry perspective, not just a TTC concern. With respect to building for the future, we need to continue utilizing technology and make data-driven decisions in order to ensure a safe, reliable, and efficient system. Our credibility is critical to our reputation, and it's the first step to becoming more relevant and sustainable. As we build our foundation, we'll move in parallel, bringing together building for the future. This is a marathon. It's not a sprint, I tell staff, and change won't occur overnight, but I can assure you that it will occur. In fact, in the October CEO's report, I announced that we are undertaking a transformational review to address the growing gap between revenues, needs, and costs. This review will be comprehensive and will be looking at our back office supports and services. We're aiming to transform for high efficiency, ensure we provide affordable, reliable, efficient, and an integrated service. We're looking at our internal administrative processes, current investments in technology, non-fare revenue, looking at the potential for expanding shared services and pooling services, and reviewing our buying power with our partners. We will present an interim report later this year to this board. We are committed to working with our partners to advance much-needed expansion projects that will address our capacity needs and challenges and grow transit in the City of Toronto and beyond. We will bring a report back to this board on the status of these projects in Q2 and Q4 of this year. None of this can happen, however, without our employees. Investing in people is key to modernizing the TTC. In our corporate plan, one of the critical paths is enabling our employees to succeed. We have a number of important initiatives underway, but our award-winning peer support program and our own internal awards program are a couple that we're particularly proud of. Having said that, we recognize we have work to do when it comes on diversity, and we are taking steps to ensure that our workforce reflects the community that we serve. And again, we will be bringing a report back to this board later this year. Before I leave off, I want to share with you some of the key upcoming decisions that need to be made as we move forward. And these include, there'll be a the 2019 budget will be coming later on this month. And we'll also be talking more about long-term planning for our capital needs and a capital investment plan, a 5-year service plan and fare policy, as well as an accessibility plan. I mentioned earlier that a Line 1 capacity plan will be brought with ATC in April, and we'll follow that later this year with a Line 2 capacity plan. Subway asset ownership, that's what when we hear about uploading will be discussed. The transformational review, you participate, as well as mobility strategy and other expansion projects. As we work together on our priorities, our commitment to you is that we will provide fulsome information, regular communications, shared governance sessions, and we'll do our best to ensure that there are no surprises. In return, we look forward to working with you on the dialogue and clear direction. And with that, Chair, that concludes my presentation. I would tell you that myself and the senior staff of the TTC are here to answer any questions this board may have. Thank you.
Thank you very much. That was incredibly informative. So at this point, anybody's welcome to ask questions. We can't move motions or speak on this item, but ask questions. Councillor Carroll, would you like to start?
Well, just the basic one. I forget the practice. Does that presentation now go online, and where will we find it online?
We will be loading that up if it's not already up there.
Yes, not
on the agenda. Okay, we will be loading.
It'll be incorporated in the agenda if they're
It'll be
looking for it.
put under the item on the agenda.
Okay, great.
You're correct in saying it's not in the package currently. Yeah.
Super. Okay, thanks.
Absolutely, it's very helpful. Any questions? Well, I'll make one up for Rick. Just on the last item that was already cleared by this board, but could you explain the funding formula for the purchase of the 48 low-floor wheel trans minibuses? Who were the partners, the funding? I know the federal government played a big role in that, but if you could just tell us a little bit more about that.
So through the chair, Richard Wong, Chief of Vehicles, we were partnershiped with Metrolinx. We had consultation with ACAT as well. And through the province, it was partly funded through PTIF. Not sure what else you need in terms of information there.
Sorry, did you say through the province?
Yeah, sorry, through the federal government.
Okay, that's what, yeah. So it was really, it was a federal partnership versus the province didn't play a role in that.
The province, the only part the province played was we
Metrolinx.
backed off of Metrolinx.
Metrolinx, okay.
So
the major partner was the federal government.
Yes. This was a first time we've partnershiped with another agency on a procurement contract, which worked out well because it's economy of scale. We got a better price for that.
Right, I understand that. That's great.
And through the chair, just to jump on and add into that, so as Rich mentioned, this was one of the projects that was identified under the PTIF funding program, which ensured 50% of the costs were eligible under the PTIF program, which was coming from our federal funding partners.
Okay, great. And just on the, I don't really have a question, but just so happy to see those trains, and that little video presentation was excellent. you know, I guess what did it take to achieve that, and how can we do more of that? Because it's really exciting initiative.
Again, through you, Madam Chair, Jim Ross really took the lead with the senior staff, most of the organization, to have a discussion about how we could do things differently. And much of what we talk about is how do we work smarter, not harder, all right? What can we do outside the box? And this is the discussion. But with that, as part of this discussion, came a broader perspective discussion on long-term requirements for growth. And I mentioned in my presentation that right now we appear to be very comfortable through 2026 to carry the capacity that's now the demand that's going to be there. But from 2026 to 2031 is become a concern to us, and that's why we have a report coming back to you in April of this year.
Great. We'll look forward to that. Any other questions? No? Okay, go ahead.
Rick, you had a slide that showed buses available versus demand for buses. And we've got a budget discussion coming up towards the end of this month, and I thought it would be useful to get us thinking about this. You show a ratio of, I think, of 100.5% of bus availability versus demand. Is that right?
So the slide on 15 that we showed on building our accomplishments on buses showed in 2017 that we couldn't always put 100% of the buses in service that we advertised. The bus fleet was just at the beginning of the rollout of the new buses coming in. But by 2018, we were able to achieve 100% of our commitment on the street, plus have additional buses available to put out when necessary.
So I congratulate you on the accomplishment, but I was going to ask, is that the optimal number for us in terms of reserve capacity to ensure service delivery? Is that a different number? Have you achieved what's optimal? What do other transit authorities try to accomplish in terms of available backup so that we have reliable service?
Through you, Madam Chair. As this board may recall, for those that were here, there was always this discussion in the last few years about a spare ratio of buses. Thank you for bringing this up. And the TTC historically had a very low spare ratio in comparison to the industry, way too low. And a typical transit system needs at least 20% spare ratio, additional buses available at any one time compared to that on the street. Now, that reason is for, at any one time, 10% of your buses should be up in the air for preventive maintenance, 3 or 4% is in a capital major program, and the other 3 or 4% is in transition in and out of service. So we today are in much better shape than we were just 2 years ago with the PTIF money that was made available and the new bus procurement.
So then my follow-up to that is, are we at the 20% now, or are we still shy of it?
We are at the 20% now.
Great.
We've actually, as we transition the older buses out with the new buses in, we're holding a few of those older buses as we transition right through 2020. And as you may recall, the previous board authorized us to purchase up to 60 additional vehicles, the electric vehicles, that'll help increase the size of the fleet minimally, but it still increases the size of the fleet. So we're really taking our time as we transition the old buses out to get the best use of our assets.
Go ahead. Do you have a question?
I've got 2 questions, Rick. First of all, just on the capital budget, 6.8 billion, 82, I think I heard you say 82% of that is really goes to the state of good repair. So we're really talking about a significant amount of our capital dedicated to maintenance. So just maybe expand a little bit about which obviously then leaves a fairly small number for expansion and development. So maybe just go over those numbers for me.
Absolutely. To put that into perspective, as you may recall, there were a number of board reports that went in June and July of last year when we talked about additional bus garages, additional streetcars for our streetcar fleet, additional buses beyond 2021. We do not have money in the 10-year capital plan for items like that. New trains for Line 2, Line 1, ATC. So that's why we're putting a capital investment plan document, taking a real holistic look at the needs over that'll be the next 15 years.
Okay. And then my second question was around the capacity. So 2026, we're comfortable about meeting capacity. We know how difficult it is to build the big projects. So when you bring back the capacity framework for us, will you talk to us about will it include what options, including the means that, the buses are easier to put into service than a subway, obviously. So what kind will it include data around where the capacity is needed, and then what are the options in terms of modes that we can put in place to meet that, what appears to be, what sounds like a pretty significant deadline,
Through you again, Chair. The Line 1 capacity review is really looking at all elements that are required for expanding the service on Line 1 beyond 2026. The power system, the signal system, the number of trains that will be available. We're still working on ATC, as I mentioned, as one of our challenges, but it's coming along very well and it's very functional. So we're getting more trains closer together, just like it was designed, and they're moving more fluidly through the system. The question becomes, as capacity grows on Line 1, especially on Yonge Street, we'll need to put more trains down Line 1 on Yonge Street, which means we'll need more trains in the future. And ultimately, as we grow beyond 2030, 31, we're looking at not just trains. As the more trains you need, the more facilities you need to maintain them. So you'll get the presentation will be a very, very big picture. On a regular basis, I'll look at the deputy or the chief customer officer. On a regular basis, we're looking at what options we have to address Line 1 challenges. Last year, when we submitted a report to increase the number of trains on Line 1 and the staffing on line with supervisors and stuff, we at the time we were looking at what could we do on Yonge Street with buses, for instance, to take from Yonge down to St. Clair and beyond, but looking at the congestion. So we're always looking at those type of items.
Go ahead.
Can I just ask a follow-up question? Because now we're talking about that big capital review that's coming. It's hard to separate them out because organically we do have to expand. But can we make sure that there's a sort of separating out at some point in that when the review comes back to us that shows us here's the capital investment needed just in a do nothing, do no expansion scenario versus here's what we really need to do to continue to meet the demands of ridership, and here are the expansions we need to make. I know it's organic, but we sometimes, when we go to our other partners looking for purchases, we get that pushback, or you're just trying to load something in for your existing system, you're loading it into this project. Well, yeah, you have to, but if we can separate out for them, we need those vehicles whether you do this line you want to build or not, so that we have the sort of the base system need and the expansion need separated out a little bit in that review so that it's clear to them, we'd need this whether you were agreeing to do that next line or not. Yeah.
The Chair, Commissioner, you'll be pleased to hear that the capital investment plan makes a very clear distinction between three things: state of good repair, which is what you need just to maintain existing capacity; growth, which comes through more jobs, more people moving around the city due to more population; and then the third thing is expansion. And to simplify things just exactly in the way that your question wonders about, it doesn't talk much about expansion, partly because that's a much bigger conversation, and we don't want to confuse. It's sometimes referred to, the previous chair spoke about the shiny object of expansion, which I think is what you're talking about. And this document focuses just on, with the exception of one page, focuses on state of good repair and growth, so that we can have a clear conversation about that, recognizing that we are in competition for scarce dollars, and there's lots of talk about the need for expansion, the relief line, for example, Scarborough Subway, and we want to make sure that there's also lots of conversation about just keeping what we've got and coping with the growth that our forecasts say we'll need to handle over the next 15 years.
Right, right. So for instance, we're not going to get into a debate with all of our partners. ATC Online 2, for instance, we would need that to address the growth of the city, even if you weren't expanding the line.
It's a great example.
We'd still need it. Okay.
Bloor-Young revitalization, we need it no matter what.
Right.
We especially need it if Young is extended north, or if whether or
Right,
not.
but we would need it anyway.
One of the things, and not to get ahead of ourselves in the conversation, but we need Bloor-Young revitalized the way Union Station has been revitalized, even if we do the relief line. And if we do neither Bloor-Young revitalization nor the relief line, which is an expansion project, it's going to be very difficult. It's going to be impossible to handle the capacity within 6 years.
Right. Okay, thank you. That's what I'll be looking for.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions? Okay, seeing none, again, I thank you for an informative, insightful presentation. And we'll move to item 6 on our agenda, the board orientation, member legal, safety and environmental responsibilities. This is a presentation. I would invite Brian Leek to come forward, TTC Council General, and we've met him already today. And then also John O'Grady, our Chief Safety Officer. If you both would come forward to make a presentation on our legal and safety-related responsibilities.
To talk to you about some of the absolutely key responsibilities and potential liabilities that you may face in your role as commissioners. As commissioners, you are effectively directors on the TTC Board of Directors. And with that, there are legal obligations and legal responsibilities that are very important that you need to know about, and I'm just going to touch on them today, but I'm happy to pursue discussion in detail at a later time. The single most important duty that you have is what's called a fiduciary duty, and that is a duty to act honestly, in good faith, with a view to the best interests of the corporation, that is the Toronto Transit Commission. And this duty is fundamental in that many other duties derive from this. If you think of conflict of interest, it is a situation where you put your personal interests above the best interests of the corporation. When someone breaches confidentiality duties, they are harming the best interests of the corporation. So many other duties derive from this fiduciary duty, and I will touch on it further in a moment. In exercising your fiduciary duty, you are not required to be perfect in your decision-making, but you are required to bring a reasonable approach, that of a reasonably prudent person, in exercising your decision-making obligations. And part of that means bringing the skills that you have. If you have financial or accounting skills, you bring those to the table in carrying out this duty. So someone may ask, well, what exactly does that mean in the context of the TTC? What is this fiduciary duty all about? And the way to determine that is to look at the objectives as those have been set out historically in legislation. And the key objectives for the TTC are establishing, operating, and maintaining a transportation system to serve all of the inhabitants of the city of Toronto. So you're looking at Toronto as a whole. You're looking at your responsibility to address the citizenry, to provide a local transportation system. That is to be distinguished from two aspects. One is that you are not in a role here as representing your ward or your constituency. That is part of representative government that takes place at the city council level. So there, that is what you're obliged to do. Voice the concerns of your constituency. You were elected to do that. On this board, you were appointed as a director, and with that comes a different level of responsibility, a different level of vision to deal with the city as a whole. The second point is that you must act independently in making decisions as a director. You're not here to be an agent, to take direction from City Council or from the Mayor's office. You act autonomously, and you do your best in making decisions in the best interest of the TTC. Your decisions do not have to be perfect. Everything is 20/20 with the benefit of hindsight, but your decisions are required to be thought through carefully. They're required to involve an element of due diligence and reasonable process. Process is a word that comes up a lot in sports psychology and various other areas, and that's the focus of what you do here, process. As an individual commissioner, there are process issues, and as a board, there are process issues. The way you address your concerns in terms of meeting your legal duties is to come to meetings prepared. Do your homework, read the materials carefully, think things through, and very importantly, come to meetings with questions. Being skeptical here is a good thing. Questions about what are the risks? What are the risks of going down this path? What are the benefits? What are the concerns that you have, staff? What are the downsides? What are the negatives? What are the alternatives? Are there alternatives that are not in this report that we ought to know about? What are the assumptions you've made? What is the evidence you've relied on? What is the best practice in other areas? What do other transit properties do? Those are the kinds of questions that you should pursue with staff and many others. Staff's job is to come to meetings and to assist you in making informed and intelligent decisions. But the best they will do is bring that to the table with a recommendation. Your job is to then probe, explore, and exercise the best of your ability to serve the best interests of the TTC. Second point that's important is board process. And there have been lots of studies over the last 10 to 15 years because of problems with boards. And what those studies have shown is that the best board results are through a collaborative process. It's not about polite discussion, about going along to get along, which results in some type of groupthink, nor is it about debate, where you come to a meeting to win the debate and convince your opponent that you're right and they're wrong. What it should be about is suspending assumptions, suspending your own judgment, truly having an open mind, listening deeply to what others say, assuming that maybe I'm wrong and they're right, and give issues a fair hearing, and to work as colleagues with a spirit of inquiry and reflection, have that informed dialogue, and then collectively put your voice forward and your vote forward. That approach, according to all the experts, is the best way for boards to function, to achieve the best results. Your functions are at a very high level and a very important level, and I'm not going to read these all to you. You're familiar with most of these, but you really set the tone at the top in terms of values, policies, standards, dealing with strategy, and dealing with the really big decisions. That's the role of a board as opposed to management and middle management down. I'm going to touch on confidentiality. This is an important issue. There's always concerns in public sector about leaks. There's always concerns about what is confidential and what is public. Not everything should be or needs to be in the public domain. The board can always decide to have something that otherwise might be confidential in the public domain. You can always make that decision, but the areas that are brought forward in confidence are done so by staff because staff believes it needs the protection of confidentiality. Typically, things involving solicitor-client privilege, information that's received from third parties in trust on the basis that we would keep it confidential, things that involve negotiation, where if your position gets out, if your strategy gets out publicly, that harms the TTC by definition. Confidential information isn't always necessarily confidential forever. The board at some point can agree to release information, as I mentioned, or by law it may no longer be deemed to be confidential. One of the very big areas of legal liability is safety. TTC is an operations-based business. It's not a financial institution. And as an operations-based business, you have a duty to oversee staff to ensure that reasonable care is being taken to ensure that the TTC complies with the main provincial legislation, which is the Occupational Health and Safety Act. There's lots of regulations and lots of detail, but the general duty provision that governs everyone in this organization is that an employer shall take every precaution reasonable in the circumstances for the protection of a worker. Now, in your roles, that does not mean you need to get out and walk around and see that everybody's doing their job properly. You don't have the time, and you don't have the expertise to do that. So it's not micromanaging. But what it does involve is dealing with senior management to be satisfied that there's a proper system in place to deal with safety, that it's functioning as it should, that the personnel out there in the field, the personnel who are supervisors for persons are adequately trained, that they're brought up to date with developments, and that you, as directors, are properly informed from time to time about major problems that may be developing in this area and other issues as and when they arise. If there is a breach of that fiduciary duty, that obligation under OSHA, there are significant fines, potentially against the corporation, but also against individuals, including up to the level of directors. I can tell you that so far in Ontario, 16 directors have been convicted. Those are all in what I would call small family businesses where they've been very hands-on and where there have been some egregious errors, mistakes, negligence. But it is possible legally that charges could be brought against senior management up to and including the director level. Under the criminal code, everyone who authorizes or has the authority to direct work, again, from the director level down to a foreperson, must take reasonable steps to prevent harm to workers and to the public. Now, criminal negligence is different than the obligations under OSHA. You have this obligation to make sure that things are done reasonably, but if you fail to do something or omit to do something that it's your legal duty to do, in other words, to ensure these reasonable systems are in place, and you show what's called wanton or reckless disregard for the lives or safety of others, then there's the possibility of criminal charges. So it's going way beyond the line of just negligence. It requires recklessness, wanton, reckless disregard for the lives and safety of others. The courts have described that as being a marked and substantial departure from what you would expect from a reasonable person in similar circumstances. So it's way beyond, it's something that would offend people in terms of the type of conduct that would warrant criminal charges. Again, very, very serious penalties under the criminal code. Environmental liabilities are similar to those that arise under OSHA in that you are obliged to ensure there are proper systems in place to deal with environmental protection matters. This includes things like spills. There are some very serious fines if a spill is occurring. There can be fines of $100,000 a day against the corporation. There can be other penalties against management and up again to the level of directors, dealing with hazardous chemicals, emissions into the air, spills into the water. All of that is covered under environmental legislation, and all of that involves an obligation to ensure that reasonable steps are taken to protect the environment in a way that's analogous to the steps to protect workers and the public at large. So I'm going to pass this over to John O'Grady, our Chief Safety Officer. John is the guy who is responsible at management level to ensure there are systems in place and to ultimately inform the Board of Directors of safety, health, and environmental issues that ought to come to this board's attention. John?
Do you want to move me forward?
Yeah,
or?
let's switch.
Oh. Thanks very much, Brian. It's a great pleasure to address you, new commissioners, and welcome to the TTC. It's a big job you have ahead of you. I'm here, as Brian said, just to elaborate on that segment of your responsibilities having to do with safety, environment, and health. It's a subset of your overall fiduciary responsibilities, but ones that are particularly defined in legislation. And I should preface my remarks by saying that the legislation that applies to us arises at all levels of government, federal, provincial, and municipal. So it's a very wide net indeed. So my main message here to you is how you are discharging your duties through our very formal safety, health, and environmental management system, and invite you to learn more about it as you get into your role in coming months. In essence, we have a very formal system, a safety, health, and environmental management system. Oops. There we go. And it is designed against very formal global standards. It's based on ISO, basically management system type of standards. We conform to ISO 9001, the ISO 14001 for environment, what's called OSAS 18000 for health and safety. And also we pay attention to the emerging guidance from the United States, from the Federal Transit Administration in the US. They have no jurisdiction, but they provide us with a peer group to compare our systems with. We meet the requirements of the Occupational Health and Safety Act, also the Environmental Protection Act, and the many other pieces of legislation that bear on our operations. What the purpose of it is to provide directors and also senior management assurance that their duty of care is being managed in a very formal and proper way. And a number of times Brian used the words, a proper system is in place. A proper system was defined in a famous case, Sault Ste. Marie versus Regina, way back in the early 80s, and it basically calls for what we have in place. I'll begin by saying the safety management system, or the safety, health, and environment management system, is governed in TTC through an executive committee chaired by the CEO and staffed by most of the executive members and some other people in a senior position in the commission. It provides oversight, direction, and resources to ensure that our safety, security, and environmental risks are understood and properly managed. It reviews safety, security, environmental performance on a monthly basis against key performance indicators, some of which are summarized in the CEO's report on a monthly basis or a quarterly basis, others of which are not, but are available to you if you want to take a deep dive into any area. It's a comprehensive review that we undertake each year to guide the goals and objectives for the coming year, and in fact for the coming 3 years, and we'll provide that to you. More on that in a minute. So as with most management systems, it's based on a plan, do, check, act kind of format. This is the underlying skeleton or framework for a proper management system. So I'll just go through the elements at a very high level. As Brian alluded to, there's a tremendous amount of detail beneath this, but we just wanted to give you the high level today. For planning, to begin, we have a policy statement, a safety, health, and environment policy statement, which sets out that we will have this safety management system and the high-level responsibilities for the executive, the management, and indeed down to the worker level. This is a requirement under the Occupational Health and Safety Act, and it is reviewed annually and signed off by the CEO and posted widely throughout the Commission's workplaces. We also have a very formal corporate risk registry. We have a small risk management office under the Safety Department, which has the responsibility for identifying not only safety and environmental risks, but all risks facing the corporation, and working with the accountable executive to ensure that controls are in place to ensure that those risks are properly managed to as low as reasonably practicable in the case of safety, or as low as our risk appetite would dictate for all the other types of risks facing us. We have a set of goals and objectives formally established through a review process, and they act as a strategic plan for us on an ongoing basis to manage our risks. For the do element of the safety management system, we have basically what the way the system works. As we identify risks that are not managed to our satisfaction, we develop formal safety, health, environmental program documents. Basically, they set out a set of responsibilities and expectations for all levels of the organization, starting with the CEO, ranging down through the executive management, and in fact, in many cases, right down to the worker level. They are there in part to address legislation or emerging issues or in response to incidents that we've had, but also just looking at any kind of event that could happen. We pay a fair bit of attention to incidents that have happened in other properties around the world, and especially throughout North America, and consider how that may play out here and develop programs to prevent any incidents from occurring or mitigate their effects. In the development of these programs, because they're predicated on the notion of responsibilities to individual positions in the organization, we go through a very, very extensive consultation process throughout the organization. This is internal to TTC, but we want everybody who's got accountabilities and responsibilities to know that they have them, to agree that they have them, and to be able to discharge them, so that when we bring these new program documents to the safety executive chaired by Rick, we want the executive to know that their staff, down to the manager and supervisor level, have all read it, all understood it, and in fact, we require sign-off for any part of the organization that has comments on the draft program. So when it comes to safety executive, it's basically a forum for concurrence with all the work that's already happened. We support the execution of these programs. Part of the approval of them, by the way, includes an implementation plan so that we understand the resourcing it'll take to do this new work and that we have the resources available to it. We track the implementation of them on a monthly basis and report that up through Rick's Safety Executive Committee so we can see that the programs are in fact being implemented the way that they are intended to be. The third aspect of the safety management system is checking. So just to carry on with, contrary to the slide, but just to carry on with this development of programs idea, once the program is implemented, one of the next things that happens is our department will do an audit to ensure that it has in fact been implemented with fidelity to the intention of the program document, and secondly, that it's actually effective, or whether in fact we need to adjust and amend the program to reflect our experience in doing the implementation, and that drives the continuous improvement element, which we'll come to in a moment. Going back to the beginning here though, one of the key external controls we have, external audits, is through the American Public Transportation Association. For those of you who are new and don't know about APTA, it is the organization to which basically all North American transit agencies belong, and it acts as a standard setting organization as well as an education and networking group. They also reach out globally. They have a significant amount of membership in Asia And they're really very good at helping us to benchmark our performance and to keep it in keeping with the best practices throughout North America and globally. They have, as part of their mandate, an audit program which involves both professional auditors and peers from throughout the industry. They come by every 3 years and do an audit against our management system. The last audit was last year, about a year ago now, in April last year. We will report to you probably at your April meeting as to the results of that audit. We'll invite the team to come up from Washington, the lead auditor and perhaps the director of safety for APTA. He'll report to you what they found. We'll report to you on what we're going to do about it, and the continuing reporting on that safety improvement plan will be available through the CEO's report on a monthly basis. In addition to that external audit, we have both internal audits, as I alluded to before. As we complete the implementation of a program, we conduct audits. We may do other audits on serious risks. And in addition, we have a whole set of about 65 what we call safety assurance checks. So these are mostly looking at the standard operating procedures for the departments who are doing maintenance or operations to ensure that the way they think the equipment or the track should be maintained is in fact how it's being maintained by all shifts, and we give them a quantitative scorecard. We do about 150 of these a year. And the other aspect of checks is that you will get, as I mentioned before, a report on key performance indicators, some key performance indicators through the CEO report on a regular basis. And finally, the other avenue of information you have is if there is a serious incident, and we did have a fatality at McCowan Yard a year ago, October, we will report to you on the root cause investigation and what we're doing to prevent a recurrence of that. And hopefully we won't have to do that, but if there is something serious, I will sit here in front of you and you can ask me whatever questions or give us any direction you wish. The final element of the management system is the continuous improvement part, the ACT, Plan, Do, Check, Act. In this case, basically we take the temperature of the health of the safety management system each year. This is a very comprehensive review, both at top-down, looking at audit findings, whatever interactions we've had with regulatory agencies, whatever incidents we've had, whatever new legislation is coming down the pike. And also we poll the local organizations to ask them what's bothering them, what do they see as the risk, what do they want to have improved in their areas. We bring that together in a very formal document called the Annual Safety, Health, Environmental Management System Review, and it will at the end guide us in developing the priorities for the coming year in the form of a 3-year plan, which is updated every year. And this document also will be available to you for your perusal. So in summary, you have heavy responsibilities as the directors of this organization. I can assure you we share them as management. What's maybe a bit unique about TTC and makes it even more complicated is that we have 4 main aspects to our safety environmental program. All companies, all employers have a duty of care for employee health and safety. We take that extremely seriously. But in addition, we have a sacred trust in keeping our passengers safe and making sure that they have no concerns about their own safety as they travel on our system. The third main element, of course, is the public, the people who share our roads, and we're very seriously looking at the Vision Zero program that the city has initiated, and we'll be certainly developing our own chapter to that overall Vision Zero program. And the final one is environment, and no one in Canada needs to be surprised that that's a very serious issue for all Canadians, and we take that extremely seriously as well, and we've got a very comprehensive environmental compliance program underway. And that's my presentation. If you have any questions for either the General Counsel or myself, we'll be happy to take them.
Thank you very much, Brian and John. Is there any questions from the commissioners for Brian or John on their presentations? Okay, it looks like there isn't. Thank you again very much. That was very detailed. So I just need a motion to receive the presentations. Okay, Commissioner Carroll, all in favor? That is carried. So we'll move on to item 7. And this is the approved minutes of the Advisory Committee on Accessible Transit. And so I would like to now ask our past ACAT chair, Raymond Dellera, and if he could come forward just to provide a few words and summary on some of the work this body's been doing. Welcome.
Thank you. On behalf of the members of the Advisory Committee on Accessible Transit, I'd like to first like to congratulate the board members on their elections or re-election to City Council and also their appointments to the TTC board. So as the 15-member Advisory Committee on Accessible Transit to the TTC board and staff, appointed by and reporting to you, the board, we are looking forward to working with you and invite and encourage you to attend our monthly meetings held on the last Thursday of every month at TTC head office. We are here to help and support building a strong transit system for the City of Toronto, especially as it relates to people with disabilities and seniors. This is my last official attendance at these board meetings as my term is ending this month, so that by the next board meeting, there will be a new chair presenting the highlights from recent ACAT meetings and who will represent ACAT's work to the TTC board in the year ahead. Today, I'm just going to bring you to your attention a few of the main highlights of items that ACAT has been working on since the last board meeting in July for your consideration. In August, ACAT took the initiative and reached out to accessibility advisory committees in surrounding municipalities and held the first ever Greater Toronto Area Accessibility Advisory Committee joint meeting. It was an event which brought together accessibility advocates, municipal stakeholders, and transit management from Toronto, Peel, and York regions, as well as Metrolinx, to discuss how we can better harmonize best practices relating to accessibility. The resulting collaboration was a success, and all parties are planning to make these types of joint meetings a regular occurrence. So it's something that we started, and we're very proud of that. Also, our design review team has been reviewing several design proposals for easier access renovations at several stations, as we normally do, such as Wilson, Runnymede, Lawrence, and Christie. We've also been working in conjunction with Metrolinx on design review for the Eglinton Crosstown LRT stations. In November, we passed a motion recommending that TTC seek clarification from Metrolinx as to the flow-through elevator design, specifically with respect to the in-car control panel location. And we requested, and then we recommended that the TTC request that all flow-through elevators follow the best practice design used by the TTC. And lastly, last month, the TTC held its annual public forum on accessible transit. And two main items of concern, or items that were voiced by the public that I would just like to highlight, relate to number one, the new Wheel-Trans phone system and some excessive wait times experienced by customers using that new system. And many also commented on the first phase of the brand new Wheel-Trans booking site. Overall, the new booking site is modern and has many advantages. And it was also noted that there are some areas that still need improvement. So that concludes my highlights. Thank you very much.
Thank you. That was wonderful, and then a great summary. We appreciate all your efforts and commitment. I think we've got a question for you from Commissioner Carroll.
Thanks, yes. You finished by saying there's still a few things that could improve the booking system. It was an awkward time. I was taking calls about it before I was sworn in, and then they dropped right off. But there are still some things, in your view, to be resolved?
Yeah, for the new booking site, there are, so it's the first phase of multiple phases, but in the first phase, there are still some things to do with formatting and how information is presented, as well as the some of the, just an example, some of the booking locations, if you're gonna book to a subway station, there still needs to be some of those, the information presented needs to be a bit clearer, and there's some technical issues with how that works. So we wanna make sure that it's very seamless, so that when people book what's called a family of services trip, so if they're booking, let's say, Wheeltrans to or from a subway station, that it should be very clear, where that Wheeltrans pickup and drop off is at that subway station. So it's not ideal the way it is right now and may cause some confusion, so we've highlighted that for staff.
Okay, so you're continuing to be interactive with them in terms of ironing it out?
Oh, yeah, so we've already submitted a whole list of things, and we're continuing to submit more things as we see them.
Okay, excellent, thank you.
Okay. Absolutely. No, just a minute here. Can we speak to this?
You can ask questions.
Okay, well,
It would end up being rhetorical. I just wanted to congratulate ACAT in doing a terrific job.
Oh, okay, well, that.
And I wanted to indicate, to encourage other board members, that I wasn't as aware of the accessibility issues as I think I should have been when I got on this board. And I can tell you that going to the ACAT meetings, which we're all invited to, is a very useful information opportunity for all of us. So I'd encourage you to attend. I've done it, I've learned a lot, and I think you might as well. So that's my only thought.
Okay, thank you. And then back to Commissioner McKelvey.
Hi, I was really excited to hear this committee existed, and I do look forward to attending one of the meetings. My question is your Greater Toronto Area Joint Accessibility Meeting, hopefully I got that right, last year. Is there a report on outcomes or recommendations that came out of those discussions, and could you share that with us?
So we did have meeting minutes that we recorded from that, so we can somehow get that to you if you're interested in seeing all the different topics that we discussed and what came out of that. So it was the very first one, so it was sort of like testing the waters with all these different people in one room, so it went well, and I think as we're planning to do the next one this year, hopefully sometime in the spring, then we'll kind of crystallize kind of with that group, what are now the main topics we want to really kind of dig into. So first meeting, we just sort of touched on a whole bunch of topics and saw what sticks, and then we're kind of going to go back now and dive in depth a little bit more.
Okay, well, thank you very much. Could I ask the committee for a motion to receive for information? Okay, that's Commissioner Kajanis is saying, and all in favor, approved. Thank you very much. We're going to move on to item 8, which is a nice segue to the appointment of the members to the Advisory Committee on Accessible Transit. Prior to doing that, though, I think we want to take just a moment to thank some of the retiring members who have been very instrumental in some of the successes you've just heard about, and we'd like to formally acknowledge them today and their accomplishments and their efforts. So if I can call upon Louise Bark, Raymond, who we just heard from, Debbie Gillespie, and Angela Marley, and Lynn McCormick. I think on behalf of all the commissioners, I'd like to say you've done an admirable job at representing the needs and concerns of people with disabilities and seniors who require accessible public transit in the City of Toronto. So we'd like to now present each of you with a wooden plaque, as well as a certificate that will entitle them to a yearly ACAT pass equivalent to the number of years served during their term. So we'll just take a moment to make that presentation, and then we'll move on with the rest of the item. But I just want to, on behalf of the commissioners, thank you for your impressive work. And I've heard nothing but great things about all of you. and we're sorry to lose you, but do want to recognize your legacy today. Okay, so in our package, we have, we've identified the new ACAT members for 2019. And so do we need a motion on that before we identify? I know it's on purple sheets, so.
You need a motion to approve the recommendations on the public portion.
Okay, so we need a motion to approve the report recommendations. I'm going to give that to Commissioner Bradford. Thank you for that. All in favor? That's so moved. So I can now announce them. So this is now public, and so we can announce the names. So I will identify the 5 new ACAT members for 2019. Margot Brody, Igor Samarzik, Sam Savona, Chris Stiga, and Shin Yogaratman. Welcome and thank you. I would also like to mention that Ian Payton and James Pio have been approved to the ACAT pool membership. So welcome to all of you. Congratulations, and we look forward to, all of us look forward to working with you. Okay. So we're moving on now to item 9. It's the TTC Board Governance and 2019 meeting schedule. And at this time, I'd just like to ask Kevin Lee, our Head of Commission Services and our clerk, to introduce this item, given this is our first meeting.
Thank you, Chair. As a result of changes to the composition of council, this report recommends changes to the board's committee structure in order to respond to increased demands on council member time to carry out city business, legislative and constituency-related duties, while also ensuring that public input into the board decision-making is not compromised. So the recommended changes that are before the board are retaining the Audit and Risk Management Committee with a lower membership number in recognition of the reduced board composition, dissolving the Budget Committee and creating a budget working group with up to 2 members. All decisions related to the budget would be managed by the board at regular special meetings. 2 opportunities for public deputations would still be available through the board and through the city budget process. We're recommending dissolving the Human Resources and Labor Relations Committee and referring those items directly to the board. Public deputations would still be available at the board, of course. If required, the board can also create a special committee to review any particular HR-related matter. For example, development of a collective bargaining mandate at that time. We just wrapped up the last CBA round, so in a couple of years, you could reconstitute the committee if you so choose. And we also are asking for direction to report back on any further opportunities to implement efficiencies through staff delegations, for example. And lastly, we're asking for approval of the 2019 meeting schedule. Okay.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
So we will now move on to our deputations for this item. And so I believe we have 2 individuals. We'll start with Alan Yule. Welcome, Alan.
Good afternoon, Madam Chair. And in keeping with introductions, my name's Alan Yule. I'm a Ward 4 resident, and this is my 8th year in this chair. On page 3 of this report, it talks about amending the configuration of this board to include a 6th city councilor who's here now. One of the biggest things happening to the TTC in almost a century of its existence is the potential uploading of the TTC property, the subway specifically, to the province. The stance of the current chair is that the TTC should have a permanent seat at the table regarding this uploading of the subways to the province. Spelt wrong, sorry about that. I totally agree with this position, but since we are already looking at a new configuration of the board, may I make a suggestion? On top of the 6 city councilors and 4 citizen appointments, we should add an 11th TTC board member. This 11th board member on the TTC board would be a provincial representative. Whether this provincial representative is a member of Metrolinx or another rep would be the choice of the Premier in the province. Having the provincial member on the board is a key piece of the puzzle for effective communication of the cities and the TTC's transit needs with the provincial government. Seeing how the province reacts to this offer of a seat on the TTC board will also help us determine how serious the province and the Premier are about fixing transit in Toronto. Thank you.
And that's a wrap. Okay. Any questions on for their deputant? Go ahead.
Mr. Yule, are you aware that the previous board passed a resolution asking City Council to approve the concept of cross-representation between the Metrolinx and the TTC boards?
Through you, Madam Chair, yes, I am, but we have a new City Council and we have a new Premier's office.
And do you think that there should be a provincial representative on the TTC board without reciprocity in the other direction?
Well, again, through you, Madam Chair, if we want a seat at the table, we have to offer the province a seat at our table as well. It's only fair.
Any other questions? Thank you very much. We're going to move on to our next deputant, Sheila Pizzi-Allen. Oh, she had to leave? Okay. That's too bad. Oh, absolutely, yes, you can.
Hello, my name's Anna, and I'm here representing TTC Riders. We're a grassroots membership-based organization of transit riders, and some of them are here in the room today. Like you, we want to see a fully accessible, world-class, affordable public transit system in Toronto. And I'm here to speak very briefly about one of the recommendations before you to dissolve the Budget Committee and establish a budget working group. But first, I want to welcome and congratulate all of you on your election and your appointment to this board. TTC Riders has a welcome card to present to you that is handmade and quite large, that has been signed by hundreds of transit riders. And we invite all of you to join us in Nathan Phillips Square following this meeting at 12:15 to receive the card and riders' concerns about potential fare increases and other transit issues. Student reps from University of Toronto Scarborough and York University will be speaking about their transit issues there. We also have some individualized welcome cards that I'll pass around at the end for all of you with some transit riders' concerns and wishing you success in your term. So we want to express our concern about the recommendation to dissolve the Budget Committee. Although the Budget Committee met infrequently, the recommendation before you effectively means that when meetings do happen, they will happen in private, and that does a real disservice to democracy. It's critical that transit riders and constituents have an opportunity to participate in budget processes and that the decisions made are transparent and accountable to the public. The budget is the most important decision that you will make about the TTC. And as you know, the TTC is chronically underfunded, and that's why our service is squeezed and fares keep rising faster than inflation. Our organization of transit riders is looking forward to getting engaged in the budget process because we know that to fix overcrowding, deliver better service, and stop rising fares, the TTC needs more funding. And so we urge you to think carefully about what it means to dissolve the public committee. And we hope to see you outside after the meeting at 12:15 to receive our welcome card. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Okay, Commissioner Carroll, go ahead.
Thanks. So I'm sorry, I didn't catch your first name. You're deputing. I don't know if I used the right word, Derek. You're speaking on behalf of Sheila.
Yes, my name's Anna Lermer.
Anna, thank you. I missed that. The issue of engagement in the process, I was nervous when I read this, but there's also in the past been a complaint that when we do have a budget committee meeting and it's clerked and minuted, that we get back to this rigid, you just talk at us and then we turn and we do the agenda. Have TTC riders, if we are going ahead with this, and you know often you come and speak and we go ahead with the thing anyway, have TTC riders done any thinking around if it is going to be a working group but we're going to provide engagement opportunities, how those might take shape and in a way that you would be comfortable with? What we might do, like I know they probably are going to say there'll be 2 opportunities to speak. So that means you could speak the day the budget comes here, and we'll have some budget town hall where you just sign up to speak and you speak at us. I'd like to see a different and earlier form of engagement. Have TTC riders wrestled with that at all?
Well, I think it's a great idea, and we would definitely welcome that opportunity. I can get back to you on whether or not we have like formal ideas about what that would look like.
Okay. Okay. Thank you.
Okay. Thanks.
Any other questions? Thank you very much.
And I just have these cards if you want to pass them around.
Yeah, I think if you would just hand those to the clerk. Okay, so that's the end of our deputations on item 9. So then we would, if there's any questions of staff at this time, would be the right time. If not, we'd move to speakers. Commissioner Carroll.
Thank you. Yes. Further to my discussion with the speaker, well, actually, the first deputant, I always enjoy Mr. Yule's presentations, but we've tried in the past, and I mean long in the past, we sort of stopped the practice of setting up committees where we asked the province to send someone to sit there, because it became not at all meaningful real fast. They came to the first meeting, were applauded for coming to the first meeting, and then slowly backed away and became the empty chair in this very room around issues of youth, children's services, all sorts of things. And it's why I actually would hope that in the new term, we'll explore the earlier suggestion that what we need is that approach that says we should be sitting in your room and you should be sitting in ours. Not, we have this thing that we discuss, would you like to be sitting there, just in case. That's a sort of a sitting duck invitation. Whereas what was explored earlier, and I don't think you finished the exploration, that there ought to be a representative there in Metrolink's room and vice versa, made a little more sense, particularly when we get to the point where through the middle of our system, the crosstown is running. And we ought to be exploring it from a governance perspective now, rather than waiting till issues arise that mean we should have done that. The issue of the budget committee turning into a budget working group, my politics is such that I should be screaming on behalf of TCC riders that shouldn't happen. What stops me is we have often frustrated people who want engagement in the budget by having a budget committee. The budget subcommittee, as soon as we say it's an official subcommittee and must be clerked and minuted with publicly announced meetings, it takes on a rigid structure. It's not really conducive to engagement in how are we going to deal with our issues before 2026 in a way that the community is part of. And so I asked TTC riders, are you thinking of it? And I think if there is a budget working group, one of the first conversations they should have is what's meaningful engagement? Not just, okay, we'll do this thing in a back room and then we'll have a town hall. Youth in this city in particular, riders in all the various organizations have said, you're asking us to respond to a finished product, and we never feel like, whether it's this budget year or we just told you something you should try and do by next budget year, they never feel like their input is getting anywhere, that they would even see it in a multi-year outlook. And so in a budget working group, I just hope, I'm putting on the record here, that engagement has to be their first conversation at meeting one. Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Commissioner Heisey is next.
I have three aspects of the agenda, the schedule I'd like to speak to. The first one is, and this is a little bit of history for people who weren't on the board previously. For 2 or 3 years, some members of the board worked hard to try to get a joint meeting of our board with the Metrolinx board, if only for a joint briefing session about an important topic, and perhaps in an ideal world, maybe even a decision-making meeting where each board could make decisions about the same matter in the same room together. And after 3 years, and there was a bit of resistance on our board initially, because I think there was a concern about losing turf. And that's the danger when you open up a conversation, you don't know where it's going to end, but the problem is the conversation is now ongoing, and we're not there at the table. And the board has been trying to get to the table with Metrolinx for some time. And we had our first joint meeting and only joint meeting with the Metrolinx board in April of 2016. It was at the Metrolinx offices. I thought everybody thought it was pretty successful, and it was very positively received. There were great pronouncements about how we should do this every year. That was me, and I spectacularly failed in achieving that. We have invited the Metrolinx board to a joint board meeting hosted by us in our room, and it's been crickets. There's been silence, and there have been various reasons offered as to why they couldn't meet or wouldn't meet. One was they didn't have a CEO in place. They only had an acting CEO. That was one reason. I still don't see why the boards couldn't talk. But I think it's time to push a little, and I would ask the board to consider giving the chair authority to write to Metrolinx to renew a request for a joint board meeting, and perhaps the chair could report back at the next meeting in February as to how successful she's been. And if they haven't responded, I say we schedule a joint board meeting date and see if they show up. Well, I'm telling you, you've got to, I don't know what to do to get their attention. And there's a lot of discussion at the province that they're going to do things. Well, wouldn't it be better to be talking with the province in a formal setting at a joint board meeting? And we could pick any number of important topics: fare integration, local transit service beyond 416 boundaries, outside and back in, all sorts of things we could discuss that are ranging from innocuous to quite controversial. But we can't even get to a topic. So that's the first issue I'd like to speak to, is that we revisit the issue of the joint Metrolinx board meeting with TTC in February, after the chair has had an opportunity to see what she can do, and I hope she can do better than Josh Cole and I did. So I'm looking forward, maybe a new face is needed. So the second item I wanted to speak to, and it's very timely, and this again involves some history, and I hope you'll forgive me if I can go a little bit beyond 5 minutes, because there are three important items. So the second item is the budget meeting, which is on January 24th. And my experience, I've now done 5 or 6 budget meetings, and my experience is that we have a large number of deputants who are passionate about the issue of fare increases or having no fare at all. They have very strong viewpoints, and there's no question. I have 2 children who have Metro passes. I know what an expense transit can be for a family. It's a major expense. But the problem is that there are so many people who want to talk to us about that we don't typically get to the meat of the operating budget. How do we decide where we should put our resources? Capital projects, a long discussion about capital projects, and I have suggested unsuccessfully in previous years that we have 2 meetings. We have 1 meeting about fare increases and 1 meeting about the balance of the budget. Because I think that's the only way. The board ends up being exhausted at the end of a whole day of deputations about fare increases. So that's sort of the second idea I have. We divide a budget meeting up into 2 meetings. And the third issue I'd like to raise is the annual forum on accessibility. The board has been criticized by the accessibility community, if that's the correct phrase, for not attending it. And I've got to tell you, it's a really good event. And I'd like to suggest that we put in the board's calendar a 1-hour meeting in the venue of the accessibility forum 1 hour before it formally starts. So that's a way that encourages us all to be there, but also doesn't hijack the meeting from the people who are running it, which are the CEO and the reps from the community. So I'd encourage you I hope that there'd be some support for trying it at least. If it doesn't work, you don't do it again next year. If we can get 5 or 6 of us there, we've got quorum. And I think it's an important statement by our commission of interest in the issue. And so those are my 3 points.
Okay.
It's a motion, actually.
Is it 3 motions?
I guess it is.
They drafted the first one for you, or we have. Do you have motions on 2 and 3?
I guess it is 3 motions. I haven't, actually, 2 of them I just thought of as the accessibility forum thought I just had as the ACAT minutes came up. And the budget, I have not drafted that, I don't.
Okay.
But you're okay. And the joint Metrolinx board meeting, we could reference our previous resolutions concerning joint board meetings and joint board representation, which I think we should bring back to the board for a fresh statement to see that there is some consensus, if there is, from this board.
Okay, go ahead. Yeah.
Having pushed you to make them into motions, I now have a question of the mover. The first one, the motion is just about the letter. Your second piece about let's schedule a meeting and sit here and wait for them.
No, that's later.
That I wouldn't be able to support, because I fully expect by the time this letter is responded to in any form and by whomever, things could be pretty tense. So I wouldn't want to see that in a motion. That I wouldn't be able to support.
So no, I'm being provocational.
Yeah.
But only because.
As is your want.
Only because we have tried to get this meeting.
Yeah.
And it hasn't worked.
Right.
And so I'll park that concept, but I think we need to talk about what we would do if we continue to get non-response.
Okay. And to your last last motion or the motion about the budget committee?
Yep.
Trying to find, I can support it in principle, but is it possible for us to vote for it in principle? Because we can't get the date right now. And I'm concerned about one thing. I'm always painfully aware that we've got to be careful about the expectations we set in post-election budget year. Because, you know, like it or not, a lot of discussion has gone on about where the budget is at before we even are sworn in. And a lot of things become sort of etched in stone by quarterly reports that we weren't even a part of. And so it passes in a flash. So I could support the concept and principle of trying to provide that extra opportunity, and we'll do everything we can to do that sort of thing so that staff have the ability to come back saying it wasn't possible. But that motion sets up an expectation for the budget working group to make it very possible all other years of this term.
You know what, as a practical matter, I was disappointed we got so quickly to the budget meeting because it really doesn't leave us time to arrange this. But if there is agreement that it's a good idea, and maybe after you've been through the budget meeting, this new group of us together, if whatever our experience is, I'd like to revisit that issue after we finish the budget public deputations to see if it resonates with the people on the board. And it's just an issue I've tried to address previously because of my own personal experience with the meetings where I don't feel we've given the issues the talk we should have. So I'll wait. So the budget item, let's park that.
Any other questions for the mover of the three motions?
No.
Oh, it's now we're down to two?
Yep.
Because we're not proceeding with the budget meeting? Correct. Because it's not feasible for this year.
Correct.
I mean, I think everybody fully understands that as it is, we're crushed, I think, so. Okay, so is there any other motions or speakers on this? Otherwise, we'll review the motions here and make sure everybody's comfortable with them. So the first one was that the TTC chair, well, they're up on the screen, and Alan already explained this. Yeah. Make that a bit larger for us. Okay, all those in favor, opposed, that carries. And then the next one, if we can put up the next one, this is related to the 1-hour TTC board meeting in advance of the accessibility forum. There it is, and bigger.
I think it should be clear that it's at the same venue.
Can we add that in?
It might.
Does that create complications for staff?
It might.
No, I want to know. Whenever we go off-site, meetings always create. Does that create, I have a question.
Do you want to ask the clerk?
Yes.
Can I get clarification on the question?
Does this create complications for staff in as much as whenever we try and move out of this place, our clerk's office always has, there's notice, are you going to televise, is it going to be on YouTube? Like we have all those things. The clerk's office always cautions us about, moving out of this place. Are you going to meet the same standards that you normally meet for all TTC meetings?
A lot of that will depend on the venue. I know in the past at the CNE, for example, we were required to use unionized labor for the audiovisual. There were cost issues associated with that. We never did get that far, but it will not be an apples to apples comparison in terms of what we are able to provide here logistically off-site, and they always do pose challenges. There's no two ways about it, but we would, if we're directed to, we will do everything we can to make that meeting run as smoothly as possible. Yeah.
Okay.
Okay, all those in favor of the motion before us? Opposed, that carries. Excellent, we're going to move on to our next item, which is item 10. The bylaw to govern TTC board meeting proceedings, and we have 3 deputants on this item. The first is Helen Lee. Oh, I'm sorry. We need to approve the recommendations before us on the last item to adopt. That would help. All right, all those in favor, opposed, carried. And we need, so the Audit Risk Management Committee, We need 3 members on that committee,
I say Ron Lalonde for sure.
because he's not here.
Yeah, 100%.
Nicely done. Okay, we've got one voluntold
I'm happy.
commissioner. Okay, Commissioner Heisey, and one more. All right, thank you very much. Okay. Is that it?
That's it.
And do-
Top the itemizing.
Now, so we need a chair, someone who is willing to chair our committee, this committee we've just identified. Is it Ron?
I've done it. I have done it. If you want me to do it,
Okay, so that, there's a suggestion, a recommendation that the committee decides. I think the clerks are comfortable with that, so it sounds like a reasonable recommendation. So all those in favor? Opposed? That is approved. We have a committee. Now we can move on to item 10 and our 3 deputants. Helen Lee is first. Helen, I think you're in one more thing? Oh, we have to do the budget working group. My apologies. So the budget working group. So we need 2 board members for this. Okay. Oh, there's 3. 3 hands went up on the right side. Is that fine? I think the clerk is fine with that.
That's correct.
Right.
And there's more staff than, working group has no final decision-making authority. Right. There's more staff than commissioners, and commissioners cannot form a quorum of the board, otherwise it's official meeting. So 3 members on the working group is fine.
Okay, so that's excellent. Lots of enthusiasm in the room. And so I would ask the commission then to vote on that. All in favor? Opposed? That carries. Now we can move on? Now we can move on. Okay. Thanks, Helen, for your patience. You can start now. I'm giving you your 5 minutes.
For those of you who are not familiar with our work, we advocate on behalf of 1.8 million transit riders in Toronto. I'm here to speak about your board meeting protocol, but first I'd like to extend a warm welcome to the new TTC board, and especially a warm welcome to the new faces, Councillors Robinson, Bradford, Perry-Janis, and Kelly. Like my colleague Anna has said, TTC Riders actually has a welcome card for the board, signed by myself and hundreds of other riders. We invite all board members to join us in Nathan Phillips Square. Should I start again? There it is, yes. Start again? Keep going? Keep going? We'll keep going. Okay. Like my colleague Anna said, TTC Riders actually has a welcome card for the board, signed by myself and hundreds of other riders. We invite all board members to join us after the meeting in Nathan Phillips Square to receive the card and listen to our concerns. I'd like to extend a special thanks to Councillor Carroll, who has already agreed to receive the card. So back to board meeting protocol. I'm here to speak specifically on public participation at TTC board meetings. Out of all the city's committees and boards, the TTC board is actually quite good in allowing the public to make deputations at meetings. Please continue this. Those of us who attend TTC board meetings don't have to be here. We want to be here. We're here because we care immensely about the decisions being made in this room. We're willing to take the time out of our busy schedules to be here, and I ask that you respect that. I ask because there have been certain members of this board who, once they see there's a long speakers list, have not hesitated to cut deputation time from 5 minutes to 3 minutes in the interest of moving things along. This shows complete and utter disdain for public participation, and I ask that you do better. I implore you to do better. 1.8 million riders of the TTC demand that you do better and accommodate those 2 extra minutes. I also ask that you make a concerted effort to consistently schedule your meetings at 1 p.m. This consistency will help the public to better plan their attendance at meetings. Now, 2019 is going to be a big year for the TTC, particularly because we have a premier who's acting like a schoolyard bully, who's already started to take away the things that make Toronto great. I and the rest of TTC riders refuse to stand idly by. Every part of the TTC, buses, streetcars, LRTs, and subways, belong to Toronto, and we fully intend to defend what's ours. At TTC Riders, we advocate for lower fares, increased service, and an accessible TTC for all. We can now update our mission to include fighting for transit justice in Toronto. And so I end my deputation by asking a simple question. Will you be our allies in the fight for transit justice? Thank you for your time.
Our next, is there any questions? No, okay, I'm going to move on to our next, and that's Alan Yule, followed by Derek Moran.
This is the first formal discussion of the rules governing the TTC board meetings in some time, and it's about time. As you know, the TTC has two major meetings on a monthly basis. There's the TTC board meeting and the ACAT meeting as well. Both are governed by similar rules. At an ACAT meeting, members of the public can make a request to do a deputation before that board. There are rules and procedures, but they are clearly laid out. Prior to December 2014, requests to make a deputation could be submitted before the TTC board as well. These requests allowed topics not initially on the TTC board's agenda to be added to the agenda to a future TTC board meeting. By now, most people have seen the lights on the new streetcars that flash before the doors open for added safety. Most people in this room have also seen the blue priority seats on our buses, subways, and streetcars. Both of these changes are a direct result of the public's previous ability to add things to the TTC's agenda. No longer allowing these deputations limits the ability of the TTC to innovate and improve. Sections 11 through 13 of this report deals with the public presentations before the TTC board. Agenda items fall into two categories, for action and for information. Under current and proposed rules, members of the public can only depute to action items. Every month, TTC staff prepares reports for the TTC board to review and consider. These reports are created in good faith by TTC staff. While these reports are full of facts and figures, unfortunately, on occasion, these facts and figures may lack context. If we've learned anything from the Donald Trump election in the States, it is that relying on only one source of your information can be dangerous. Any report created for this board that cannot withstand the additional information and/or context brought from the public is a report not worthy of being considered by this board. In February of 2015, the CEO's report was reclassified from an action item for an information item. As a result, TTC staff and that iteration of the board missed out on the opportunity to learn how the carrying capacity of our subway shuttles, when needed, could be increased by as much as 10%. As TTC board members, you deserve access to all possible sources of information on the TTC to help you inform your decisions. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions? Thank you, Alan, and we'll move to Derek Moran. He's here? Yeah, there he is.
Okay, so right off the bat, just so we're clear on this, nowhere in this board's bylaws does it say that members of the public who come to speak here can't ask questions, right? Or as Wendy Wahlberg might say to Councillor Perks at council, nowhere is it prescribed by law that people who come to speak at these meetings can't ask questions, barring any objections, of course. So in this report, it mentions section 13 of your bylaws, public presentations. Public presenters to a meeting must, 1, not speak disrespectfully about anyone, 2, not use offensive language, 3, speak only about the subject on which the board invited them to make a public presentation, and 4, obey the procedures bylaw and any chair's ruling. I just have a general problem with obeying government. I think section 15 of the criminal code says that I don't have to obey de facto law. So this is from U.S. Supreme Court, Yikvo versus Hopkins, just so everyone knows. Sovereignty itself is, of course, not subject to law, for it is the author and source of law. But in our system, while sovereign powers are delegated to the agencies of government, sovereignty itself remains with the people, by whom and for whom all government exists and acts, like this board. So in regards to number 3, speak only about the subject on which the board invited them to make a public presentation. Now, you knew, Councillor Robinson, that Giorgio Mammoliti worked in mysterious ways, didn't he? Do you remember this particular Public Works meeting where Councillor Mammoliti got into it with the lawyer here? Of course, Councillor Lee here is not paying attention. But Councillor Mammoliti got into it with the lawyer here. I'm not going to read the whole thing, but what the lawyer had to say was, well, it's entirely appropriate for any deputy to say whatever they basically want to say. Because even though Scott Duncan says there's no such thing as a good lawyer, you have to give credit where credit's due. And even this lawyer seemed to understand that Section 2B of the Constitution, again, guarantees our freedom of expression, which means when we come to these meetings, we don't have to stick to the topic. So in regards to number 1 and number 2 of Section 13, this was retweeted actually by Oliver Moore of the Globe and Mail. He's just sitting right over there. This is from Laura J. Nelson of the LA Times, who posted an article from the LA Times and explained that it says, federal courts have ruled that under the First Amendment, public speakers at Los Angeles City Hall can't be stopped or ejected for uttering vulgar or racist words. Oh, Laura, but when you come here to the City of Toronto, don't try and sign up to speak on item number 6 at the TTC board, or else your so-called servants will tell you that you can't because they passed a bylaw which gives them extra special magical authority powers that allow them to violate your guaranteed freedom of expression, Section 2B of the Constitution. Usually it's not reasonable to expect that the City of Toronto would actually tell the truth, but in this case, if the TTC board said so, I guess it must be true. So this is from the Supreme Court of Canada, R versus Keegstra, 1990, where an activity conveys or attempts to convey a meaning or message through a non-violent form of expression, this activity falls within the sphere of the conduct protected by Section 2B. This section protects all content of expression, irrespective of the meaning or message sought to be conveyed, no matter how offensive it may be. The government's purpose in enacting Section 319(2), or in this case, whatever that section of your bylaws are that prevented me from speaking on item number 6 today, was to restrict the freedom of expression by curtailing what people may say. The Section 16 says public attendance and conduct. No one may display signs or placards or engage in conversation or other behavior which may disrupt a meeting. Supreme Court of Canada in Ramsden versus Peterborough City, 1993, said that my reading of Dorval Airport leads me to conclude that the issue decided by the Supreme Court of Canada was that if a person is at a location on public property to which the public has a general right of access, freedom of expression permits the direct communication of views to others by discussion, by distribution of written material, or by carrying placards. So signs and placards are actually allowed here. And Councillor Robinson, I just want to thank you before I end. Anything that you or your office may have done to help out with that harassment matter going on earlier this summer at the Northern District Library, I just want to thank you for that.
All right. Thank you, Derek. And that brings us to the end of our list.
Any questions?
Unless there's any,
Maybe
I was
Councillor
going to say
Carroll?
that, but you could say it too. Any questions? Seeing none, we are going to move into questions of staff. Councillor McKelvey, or Commissioner McKelvey. It's hard to remember the two C words, titles. Go ahead.
Someone mentioned the times for the meetings, and looking back through the calendar that we did just approve, there aren't times on there, and there's also not the ACAT meetings on there. Is it possible for us to get a list that's updated with both times as well as the ACAT times?
Typically, our meetings begin at 10 a.m. in the morning for the in-camera session, the committee of the whole session. We deal with the confidential items first in the morning at 10 a.m. Then when those are done, we recess for lunch and we reconvene publicly at 1 p.m. That's the normal regular meeting schedule. So that's what you would see on those meeting days, board meeting dates. Committees might be a little different, but we tend to follow that script. The reason this one is 10 o'clock in public is because of the fact that this is more of an administrative procedural meeting. It's different. It's not the normal items that you would see. So when we get into the regular monthly flow, it'll be a 10 a.m. committee of the whole in-camera session for confidential items, followed by the 1 o'clock public session, if that helps.
And then the second question about ACAT, is that possible to add to the calendar or to provide?
Yeah, oh, certainly. We could, my colleague is saying that we can prepare one calendar with everything on it.
Great, thank you.
You're welcome.
Any other questions for staff? Seeing none, we'll move to speakers. I know that you want to speak, so do you want to start, Commissioner Heisen?
So if you could put up the motion that I'm proposing. I thought today was interesting because I think it underscores what I think is the rightness of what I'm suggesting today. We have a series of deputants. Sorry, I apologize.
Do you want option 1 or 2, or what?
Option 1, I think. Yes, please, sorry.
It's helpful.
Yeah, no, I wanted people to see it. Yeah, let's read it before I start. So my concept is that if we have a deputant who, make it bigger font. We've all got that problem. If we have a deputant, we've had deputants who have deputed on 4 items. And on some meetings, we've had 2 or 3 deputants depute on multiple items. And that could mean that you could have 2 or 3 deputants getting access to an hour of board time, which is a pretty valuable resource. And I would say today, Mr. Yule is one of those people who shows up a couple times a meeting, and today he did a great job, and I timed him. His total presentation was well under 4 minutes, and he deputed to 2 items. And I believe that, I'm not sure what Mr. Moran wanted to get to us, but I think he could have done it in fewer minutes than 10. And my bet is if he'd put it in writing, that would have assisted us. And that's the thing to remember. There's no restriction on people providing the board information in writing. And many public deputants have given us useful information. And it's very useful if it comes in writing. But if they want to just do it orally, it's my suggestion that there be a limitation. And it's been my experience that it has been, there's a number of individuals who have strong feelings about many items on our agenda in one meeting. And I'm great that they're here, but I think there should be a limit on the amount of total time any single deputy is allowed to have. So that's my suggestion, and it's a change, and I suppose we could approach it this way. First of all, you can change your mind in a meeting if someone's doing great and the written presentation suggests that they should have longer than 3 minutes. We've always allowed people longer than 5 if required and if there's something useful going on. And secondly, we could revisit this issue in a year and see how it worked. If we don't like it, we could go back to what we have now. So that's my thought. That's it.
Turn my mic back on. Any questions for the mover? Councillor?
I have a question, the mover. I have one bugaboo where this becomes a problem, and we experience it ourselves sometimes. Come January 24th, we're going to have things that people are very concerned about in both operating and capital. And one of those ends up with short shrift if there's only one opportunity to speak and you've got 5 minutes. If you've got several issues you want to speak to in operating and several in capital, then you're really hampered. And it's a thing that's only going to come up once a year, but it's a really important thing.
Well, my response to that is, please put it in writing. I promise you I'll read it. And if I find something that the board finds something in the written presentation that is beyond the scope of the 5-minute total presentation time they've got for an oral presentation, board questions, there's no time limit for the totality of board questioning and responses to those questions. There's a lot of opportunity for interaction between the board and a deputant.
I would have a question then, and I think it's a question for the clerk, not the mover. Go ahead. I'm wondering, does our bylaw, in the same way that we've been using the will of the board has left us with that Robert's Rules way of moving from 5 minutes to 3 minutes, which is something that we've done in the past. Does the same hold true if it's the will of the board that we have a TTC meeting on which there are some big, meaty, contentious issues? We could say, you know, I've heard from TTC riders or a representative of ACAT. Is it the will of the board that someone be allowed to speak on 2 items? Could we make that decision meeting by meeting?
Yes, you could, because there are provisions in the bylaw that allow you to waive it. So if you put a cap as 5 minutes on, per day, there are meeting provision.
Yeah, so that unless the board decides other means, we just need a motion. Is it the will of the board? And we could change, we could vary it depending on the agenda. Okay, I can live with it.
Okay, so.
Madam Chair, if I may offer one comment.
Go ahead, yes.
And that is that generally the amendments to any bylaws, procedural bylaws with TTC require city council approval or sanctioning. And so for the next meeting of city council, we're looking into several months from now. So this would not be effective necessarily for the next meeting, January 24, or the next budget session. So I can look into that, whether the bylaw amendment is to be treated as effective pending approval by City Council, or whether it's not effective until City Council approves. I just want to verify that one way or the other, and I can report back to the members of the commission.
Okay. Next meeting?
Yes.
Okay. So are you okay with that?
I'm totally fine with it. I just want to get started in that direction. How we get there and the timing of it, that's, you know, if it takes a couple of months, it takes a couple of months.
Okay.
For clarification, we will be minuting that the item has been referred to staff to report back on, at the next meeting on the option to place a 5-minute limit on total speaking time at a meeting. Okay?
Okay.
Thank you.
All right, so
Motion to refer.
we're deferring this item we're actually referring it to staff. So all those, referral for a report back. So all those in favor, opposed, that carries. We actually only have 2 items left because the other items we've dispensed of, and both were held by Commissioner Carroll. So we're on to items 12 and 13. Notice of award making Runnymede Station accessible. And this is for information report. Commissioner Carroll?
Thanks, yes. Maybe in the interest of time, maybe it's better if I just speak to them, because I have spoken to Ms. Tanaka-Reed offline.
Okay, that's fine, because I don't think anybody else has any issues or concerns.
Yeah.
So why don't you
My
go ahead.
questions were regarding both of them, simply because these are accessibility station contract awards. We've had a history in the past. We go in to do a station, we've done an award and a contract, and then it turns out maybe there hasn't been adequate consultation, and we're focused on the technicals of the elevator and in-station, and then the scope of the project starts to grow as you go in late to have a community meeting. And the wording of the reports was such that I thought we were doing that again, because it speaks to post-election, we'll speak to the local councillor, and post-election we'll have a meeting with the community. But I checked with the associated staff, and there have been ongoing consultations with ACAT. There have been early meetings with community, so I'm comforted. One that I always watch for is the older stations, like Wilson has the old passenger pickup, the old round building, and there are different kinds of accessibility issues, but if you're dropping somebody in a car, you drop them there. So did somebody go and look to make sure that if you were visually impaired or whatever, that's still a place you could be dropped off and make it to the train. And that was reviewed. It's just not highlighted here because it ended up not needing to be in the scope of the contract. And so I had my questions answered, but just for future reference, because it is now a ramped-up program, we're going to see these coming forward 3 at a time as quickly as possible. That's what I'll be looking for in the future. Yeah. Okay, thank you.
Thank you. So we will then move to, unless anybody else has any comments or concerns, we're going to receive this for information. Is someone would like to move that motion? Commissioner Heisey, and all in favor? That carries. And then on to item 13, notice of award, making Wilson Station accessible. Again, an information report. If we could have a motion to receive for information. Commissioner Carroll, all those in favor? That carries, and that is a wrap to our inaugural meeting of the TTC for this term. Thank you, everyone. It was a very well executed meeting, and I would need a motion to adjourn. Yes. Commissioner Karajanis, all in favor? That carries.
Congratulations.
Yeah.